Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We do a couple of webinars a month, and sometimes they're introductions to ClubExpress, and sometimes they are deep dives into particular bits of functionality or modules, and sometimes webinars are about new features. ClubExpress is continually under development, and we release new features all the time. And today is a webinar that shows some of the features that have recently been added to ClubExpress so that you can take advantage of them. But let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping first. All the phones and microphones are muted, so if you have questions, enter them into the chat window. We will revisit the chat after Dan does his demo to see if there were any questions that were not answered. And this is particularly useful for those of you who are watching this webinar as a recording. And speaking of recordings, all of our recordings, whether they be webinars or tutorial videos, are available on the ClubExpress Cool Stuff page. So what you can do is you can go to clubexpress.com, click on the Cool Stuff link, then click on, say, the Webinars tab, and it'll show you the schedule of upcoming webinars and a list of recorded webinars. There's a similar list of recorded tutorials on the Tutorial tab. All of our videos are actually stored on YouTube. So if you're watching a video on YouTube, you can click on the subscribe button and optionally click on the bell to notify. So that way you can be notified when there is new content. And finally, what we'd like you to do if you're using ClubExpress, and particularly if you really like using ClubExpress and it's working well for you, is to visit clubexpress.com/reviews, click on one of these review sites, and leave a review so other people can have the benefit of your experience. So, Dan, why don't you share your screen with us?
Okay, thank you, Alan, and welcome everyone. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy during these very challenging times. I know it's difficult for many clubs and associations to continue meeting and having their operations, but hopefully we've got the tools available for you to meet online and to have safe face-to-face meetings when it's appropriate. As Alan mentioned, we announced version 9.4 on Monday, and most of what we announced has been deployed. There's a couple of things that are still in final testing. I'll point those out when we get to them. And of course, we're working very, very hard on version 9.5, which is going to be one of our biggest releases ever, and we're expecting that in about 5 to 6 weeks. So what we're going to talk about today, very quickly, a couple of changes with credit card processing, a survey request, and then you can see the other items here that we announced on Monday, and I'll go through and point those out to you and demo them for you as well. So just a change with credit card processing. It's going to affect probably about 60% of our customers. Visa, MasterCard, and the banks that underwrite credit card transactions are continually getting stricter in the credit card processing rules. And so we are now required to collect for all of our customers that use the built-in merchant account either a federal tax ID number, or if you don't have one of those, we will need the social security number of the president or treasurer. And we will also need the date of birth of the president or treasurer. And when this information changes, whenever there's a change in who fills those roles, we're going to be modifying the system so that it prompts you automatically to enter that information. Now, it's important to understand that we don't keep that information. We're not interested in your social security number. We collect it, we encrypt it, and we forward it to our merchant processor, and they run background checks that are required by Visa, MasterCard, and the underwriting banks. Now, it turns out that we don't have this information for about 60% of our customers, and so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be sending out emails prompting you to collect that information. And I do need to point out that information will be required if you want to continue processing credit cards through ClubExpress using the built-in merchant account. Now, if you decide to set up your own merchant account, that'll be fine, but they will also require that information. So regardless, that information will have to be provided. And there's one other thing that I want to point out before we get into features, and that is that part of a future release, we're considering 2 enhancements to ClubExpress that will require a major development effort, but will also be extra cost features. One of those is the option to do full text searching within uploaded documents. Now, in order to build this feature, we have to contract with a third-party provider that has the infrastructure to store the documents and to index the documents and then has the API to provide the searching functionality. So this feature will have, if we decide to implement it, if enough clubs are interested, a one-time setup fee, and then also a monthly fee. So the monthly fee could be $20 or $30 per month in order to have all of your documents stored, indexed, and to provide the search functionality. The second option is a module that'll sort of tie in with the event calendar, but it'll tie in with other parts of ClubExpress as well, where you'll be able to create a layout. Now, it could be a layout that's a banquet or event. It could be exhibit booths at a convention. Maybe you're a yacht club and you have mooring slips and marinas where you have different slips that can accommodate different sizes of boats. And the idea there is that you can present that diagram to users, and if it's a banquet, they can pick what table they want to sit at. And if it's a registration that includes 4 people, they can pick only a table that has 4 seats, and that'll be the table that they're assigned to. But if it's an exhibit booth, they can pick the exhibit booth, and that'll tie in with a payment function where they pay for that booth. Or if it's a mooring slip and they have a 30-foot boat, they can only pick a slip that accommodates a 30-foot boat, and then a pending charge will be created. So it's one module that we hope will work in all of these different scenarios. And this one will also have an additional one-time setup fee, but it won't have monthly fees. If you're interested in either of these 2 features, the link is down the bottom, clubexpress.com/survey20. And if you click that link, there's a little 2-page survey where you can tell us your level of interest in either of those features. We'd ask each club to vote once and once only. And then once you do that, we'll obviously tabulate the results and then make some internal decisions. If we're going to build either of these features, it will be towards the end of the year. We'll see what people decide.
Dan, there's a question saying, does the potential word search of documents include text within, say, PDFs?
Yes, that's exactly the point.
Okay.
It will be PDFs, Word documents, Excel, PowerPoint, all of the standard formats. But the idea is that we store the documents, and then this third-party service that we use actually goes in and finds all of the text in those documents. We'd be able to do exact match searching, proximity searching, phrase searching, lots of different, very, very powerful functions. So, this function is really for clubs and associations that have a very large library of documents, back issues of a monthly, magazine or newsletter, for example. All of that is certainly part of the plan. So we've added a new option that many organizations have been asking for, and that is the ability to define a membership as a business membership. Now, this is different from whether people join your club or association through their personal lives or business lives. And I'll give you an example. You might be a cycling club that obviously people join through their personal lives, but you also want to be able to have local cycling shops as business members. And when you do that, there's a number of things that change. So let's talk first about how that's defined. So we're going to switch over to one of our test clubs here. And I'm looking at the control panel and the people tab. And I go down to member types. And we have a membership type that we defined here called local business. And there's a new option down here that says business membership, yes or no. And if you select yes, then you get a second question, which says, can members within the business add themselves to this membership? Now, if it's just a cycling club or a yacht club or a running club or a snowmobile club, you probably would set this option to no. You can have business members, but the business member, it's just, one person. But let's say you're a professional or a trade association. For example, you might be an association in the chemical industry, and you want to allow companies that are in the chemical industry that are members of your association, you want to allow them to sign up. But then individual employees can add themselves to that membership. And so if you select this option, if you select business membership, you change this option to yes. And now we have a way that members can actually add themselves to that membership. And I'll show you how that works. So what I can do is I can go to the control panel and to the member manager, and let's select local business, and I'll go to the search function. So here is balloon supplies are us, And if I click on this and go to Chapters, Additional Members, you'll notice here that there's a new panel. And this new panel only appears if you select the option where members can add themselves. So the person who's the primary coordinator for the business membership, the primary contact within the association, can then give this code out to any employees who want to add themselves. Those employees will go through the wizard, and I'll show you that in just a moment, and they go into the database as a prospective member. And so in this case, Colleen has added herself to this membership, and the primary contact, Samantha in this case, will get an email to say that Colleen has asked to be added to the membership, and Samantha can go in and can then either approve or reject Colleen's membership. So if somehow this code gets out into the wild and you don't recognize the name of the person who's signed up, they would get a rejection message. If there are fees associated with the additional person, then the primary contact can pay the fee, or the secondary member can log in and pay the fee as well. Now I'm going to log out for a moment, and I'm now on the public side of the website. And when I click New Member Sign Up, you'll notice there's this new option here. Now this option will appear if your club has business memberships. And the default is I want to join the club as a new member. But you also have the option, if there are business memberships, of saying I want to add myself to an existing business membership. And here I get a field that allows me to add the code. And if I type in the code, hopefully I got that right, and then click Next, it immediately knows what type of membership you are. It knows what company you're wanting to add yourself to. So everything else on that first screen is skipped, and we jump immediately to the second screen. And now we could go through the wizard and add ourselves potentially as a member to this membership. So once you enable this option, then each business membership, the primary contact person gets an authorization code. They get entered as a prospective member, and the primary member can log in and either approve or decline the membership. Now, we've also redesigned a number of other screens. So the profile contact info screen has been redesigned. Let me show you that one briefly. I'll log back in as Martin. Now, we're running on one of our test clubs here in our development environment, so it can be a little bit slower than production. And let me go back to the member manager, and I'll filter again for local business. And you'll notice here that the member manager has been modified. So instead of showing Samantha Elizabeth as the contact person, the business is actually the member, and Samantha Elizabeth is actually the primary contact. When I go to the profile page, it now says company profile instead of contact info. And when I go here, here is the contact information. The company is Balloon Supplies R Us. So this whole screen has been reorganized. There's the company information at the top, there's the company address, and the member contact information is down at the bottom. So that's a couple of those screens that have been reorganized. We also changed, as I just showed you, the first screen in the member sign-up wizard, the member manager, and also the member directory. So if I go to the membership directory, and then you'll notice that in the member directory, again, we've got the company here, and then underneath the company, it shows the title and then the person who fills that title. We've also updated a number of reports, and mailing labels are being updated as well. That's actually in process right now. And so the idea is that whether people join your organization through their personal lives or their business or professional lives, you can actually have business memberships, and you can have memberships that allow people to join the membership themselves without having an admin or the primary contact having to add those people.
So Dan, Carrie asked, almost all of my members are businesses. And one, do I need to go through all of my members to fix this or change the business memberships? And two, will this make my reports for events come up with the business name instead of the person name? So I guess what we're asking is, Why would you make somebody a business membership? Are they more like secondary or tertiary members that are assigned to a primary member? What's the difference between a business membership and a member who joins through their professional lives?
Okay, so the real reason for making this change is how you want things to appear on the website, in the member directory, in the member manager. If the membership is a business, then it's a good idea to have a business membership. If somebody is simply a professional working for a company within a professional or trade association, the membership is actually the person, then there's really no need to make them into a business member. You can leave it exactly the way it is right now. The member is the individual. They happen to work for a company, but you're more concerned about them as an individual. This is more likely to be used by trade associations, where the members are actually individual businesses within the trade association, and the people who work in those businesses, to some degree, is secondary. Now, there may be some reports or parts of the system that we haven't yet updated. I think in the event calendar, some of the reports may not have been updated. But generally for events, when you've got people who are registering for events rather than businesses, and so things like name tags, you would want the person to be the big text on the name tag with maybe their company underneath in smaller text rather than the other way around. So I wouldn't rush to sort of go in and change everybody. Think about who it is the member, and how do the people within that organization relate to the club or association.
So the follow-up question is, the individuals that are members under a business membership, they still have unique logins, correct?
They do. There will be one primary contact person, but there will, and then all of the other people that are part of the business membership will be secondary members. So they do have their own logins. There's one scenario. We have a trade association running on ClubExpress where the members are shops, retail outlets that are part of this trade association. Let me use this as a theoretical example. Let's say you've got a sandwich shop association and Subway wants to join as a member, but then each shop within the Subway chain wants to have a presence in the association so they can participate in discussions about social distancing and delivery and whatever. So there, Subway or Jimmy John's or Jersey Mike's or whatever would be the member. There'd be a primary contact person, but then each individual shop could also be a member underneath the business membership.
Yeah, so this would also be good for, say, Chamber of Commerce, where each of their members are actually a store or a business, and that way they could have multiple people for each one of these businesses.
Right, or multiple locations for the businesses. Right. So yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a Chamber of Commerce, is a perfect example where you might want to allow this.
Okay.
Let's move on. So the next thing is discussion forums. And many of you are using the discussion forums module, and you'll recognize that we had an option there to do what we call strong threading or weak threading. And strong threading actually added a funky code to the subject line of each message. And this was the way we were able to keep the messages together when you had an email-based forum and people were replying to messages via email or creating new threads via email. Well, that's no longer required. We've beefed up the way threading works behind the scenes. We haven't yet removed the strong threading or weak threading option. So if I go to the other version of the demo club, which is our actual club here, right here. So I'm going to go to forums, and let's pick one of these forums. And you'll notice down at the bottom, we've had this option here that says strong or weak threading. You can turn off strong threading. You no longer need it. For now, just select weak threading, and that little funky code will disappear, but the threading will work much better than it has in the past. And over the next couple of weeks, we're actually going to pull this option out of the platform. You won't see it anymore. But if you want to switch over right now, you can certainly do so. We also allow you now to customize the disclaimer note at the bottom of each message or each digest message. So, many clubs have discussion forums in areas where people are giving advice. And you might want to have a note at the bottom of each message that basically absolves the club of responsibility or liability for any advice that's provided in the forum. And you can do that by creating a disclaimer note. And let's go to the forums manager. And the place where this is done is a new option down here, forum email disclaimer. And basically you can write a note here, and this will be tacked on automatically at the bottom of every emailed message and emailed digest. It's not put on the messages that you view online. It is included via email. Okay, let's keep going. When you drill into a thread right now, and then you want to return to the list of threads, you're now returned to the place where you started. We've also added a button that allows members to jump to their profile forum membership screen. So if they see a forum, perhaps is a member opt-in forum and they're not a member of it, they can jump over to the membership screen to add themselves to that forum. We've added some new tools for administrators. There are reports where you can see the email address that each member is using for a forum, and you can also search on these alternate email addresses. In the forums manager, there's a new icon to jump directly into that forum. That's this view icon right here. And here is the report I mentioned earlier. Report members by name, by handle, and these will now include the email address that the member is using for that forum. There are also new tools to combine two threads into one and to move a post from one thread to another. Now, I did want to mention that we actually had a meeting with 5 or 6 clubs that are our most intensive forum users about 2 or 3 months ago. And, we presented them with a list of about 50 or 55 enhancements that we had in the wish list. And we discussed them and we voted on them. Some of those clubs really wanted certain features, and there are other clubs that couldn't care less. But, we tabulated the results and came up with a set of enhancements for discussion forums. And these are really the first batch of those enhancements. So there's a lot more coming. And I did want to point out that one of the most important features that's getting very close, not quite ready yet, but it's getting very close, is a redesign of the user interface for threaded view and flat view. So we're going to significantly update those user interfaces, add new features, a like feature, and vote up, vote down, those sort of things. So we're working on all of those features right now. I'd expect those to be deployed as part of version 9.5. Event calendar. We've made a number of enhancements in the event calendar, and we're continuing to work on the calendar as well. So there's a couple of things here that haven't quite been deployed yet, but they're in final testing right now, and they'll be deployed probably by the end of the week. So a couple of enhancements to the waitlist. You can now, in a multi-activity event, you can now flag which activities or items need to be included to determine whether the waitlist should be invoked. In the waitlist manager, you can now reactivate a waitlisted member who didn't register on time. And there's also a new export. You can export and get a list of everybody on the waitlist. For a multi-date event, if one of the dates has to be cancelled, that's now shown in the display. So let's have a quick look at that. We'll go to the calendar. There's my mouse. And if I select Flying for Kids, I go to this particular event. And you'll notice that for some reason, August the 15th had to be cancelled. And so we clearly show that now in the display. For a multi-activity event, there's now also a copy function within the same event. So let's go to a different option on the event calendar. Here it is, the National Conference. And I'm going to go to the admin options, and I can see activities and items. And you'll see now there's a new copy icon right here. And the copy icon basically allows you to copy. So if you have multiple activities or items which are very, very similar to each other, you can actually click the copy function and it'll make a copy, and then you can edit the copy, make only minor changes, but all of the other stuff that you've taken all that time to configure will be included in the copy. For quick events, we've added a new visibility option very similar to single activity and multi-activity events. Here's one that I know a lot of people will be applauding. When you specify that registration for an event closes on a specific date, you can also now specify the close time. And we've modified the text around the close date and time to make it very, very clear that the date and time is inclusive. So if you say that an event is going to close on August 31st and you don't specify a time, then the event will be open until August 31st at 11:59:59 p.m. If you specify a time, let's say 8 p.m., then the event will be open right up until 8 p.m. and then it will be closed. We've also allowed you to customize the text that's used for fee and fee after. So let me show you those. If I go to the event manager and go down to event defaults, there's a new option here, label for the first price in the matrix. So you could call that the early bird fee if you want, and label for the second price in the matrix, and that could be the regular fee. Or you could say registration fee and late fee, whatever text you want to use for these. And there's another feature also that I might as well show you while we're here, and that is that when you're in list view on the calendar, you can actually change the text that's used. So for example, I could say purchase tickets. And when I click save and go to the calendar, obviously in grid view, there's no place to say purchase tickets, but when I go to list view, I can modify the text. It doesn't change immediately. There's a cache reset that happens every few minutes. And so basically the text associated with this button, instead of saying view, it would say purchase tickets. So when you're creating a new event, the event category no longer defaults to the first item on the list. It must be specified. We had clubs that were telling us that their events were being assigned to the wrong category. And of course, categories are color-coded in the grid, so they wanted to make it easier for people to assign the correct category. We also had clubs that were telling us that when somebody opted out of receiving general notices from the club, that event reminder emails were included in that opt-out. And so we've now excluded them. Event reminder emails will now always be sent to people who've registered for the event. The list view, this was the thing I just showed you a moment ago. Event email confirmations now include chapter info if your club or association has chapters. And then this is one of these features that's not yet deployed, and that is the search panel. So the search panel in the event calendar has been redesigned. It's much easier to find. It'll now be a button across the top. And more importantly, it's got some new options, but also when you use the query string options, which is a very advanced feature in the event calendar, it's documented in the help system. Those query string operators will now feed into the search panel so that, that's the view that you'll see, but you can then modify it. And also, and this was a request from a club, there's a special print calendar button at the bottom of the calendar. So if I go back, for example, to grid view, I'm talking about this special option down here, which prints a special version of the calendar. It will now respect the filters in the new search panel. So if you've filtered the calendar down to only show events of a certain category, and then you want to do print calendar, the special display will only show events within that category. And that also has not yet been deployed, but will be deployed by the end of the week. Here's another one that a number of clubs and associations asked us for, payment at the event only. What was happening in the past was that if this was configured for the event, we would still create a transaction, even though the event said payment at the event only. And then if people logged out and then they logged back in again, they would see the icon, they would get a message to say you have a pending payment. And people were going in and making that payment before the event, which defeated the whole purpose. So we've now changed that so that if an event is configured for payment at the event only, that pending transaction will not show up on the payment page for the member. It's just not visible. The member then pays at the event, and an admin can come along that evening or the next day. And when the admin goes to the payment page for that member, they will see that pending charge and they can record the fact that payment was received. Or if the member couldn't show up for some reason, let's say it's a family visit to the zoo or something like that, well, they can just cancel the registration and then that payment disappears. We've added some sort options to the event manager. So again, if I go back to the event manager, here are the sort options down at the bottom here. So those have been added. For a multi-date event, you can now record attendance for each date separately. And this is another feature that's still in final testing. And when you run the export of events, the event list export, it now includes the location information for each event. So that was a fairly simple addition. Okay, so a couple of changes for QuickBooks Online. We announced support for QuickBooks Online, many months ago, and a number of clubs have been using it. And as they've been using it, we've unfortunately discovered a lot of complexities and a lot of issues that clubs have to deal with. QuickBooks Online is incredibly finicky about names and IDs and item names and class names and things like that. So as people have been using it and giving us feedback, we've been adding features so that we can make the process of getting everything configured and working as simple as possible. So one of the things we've done is we've added a default item name at the financial account level. So if I go to this version of the club, let's go to the control panel, the money tab, and we'll go to financial accounts. There is now a QuickBooks default item name that is required, so you can specify it. And then if there's any events or memberships or whatever, in this case it's event registrations, but it could be memberships or donations. If there's any of those where you haven't specified the QuickBooks item name, the system will now use the default item name. We will now create customers' accounts, classes, and items on QuickBooks Online if they've not been found. If there are transactions or payments that don't transfer, we'll now flag those to be resent, even if the date flag has moved on. We've added a new report that will show you the item and account names for everything in the system. There's also a new history option here, and let me show that to you. So if I go to QuickBooks Online in this case, so there's a new history option that will show you all of the transfers that you've done, and there are reports associated with that that will show you the details of those transfers. So let me just run this report very quickly. And it shows you the details of what happened in that transfer. There were 4 invoices or transactions that were sent, and the amount and the reference, and there was 1 payment that was sent as well. And we've also added, let's just go back to QuickBooks Online. We've also added a report at this level that will show you all of the item and account names and also accounts that are missing required information. So this is a new report that really allows you to zero in on what's missing to explain why a QuickBooks transfer might have actually failed.
And Dan, just to be clear, the regular QuickBooks, the QuickBooks desktop, is still supported and has been supported for years, correct?
Yes, that's correct. On the money options page, let's go there and just show everyone. On the money options page, when we go down to the QuickBooks section, once you enable QuickBooks, there is a one-time charge. And then after that, here is the QuickBooks type, and you can select desktop or online. And the options will change. And the screen that I just showed you will change if you have desktop selected rather than online. So it's one or the other. Let's go to some other enhancements. So for gift memberships, you can now specify a future date in which the email will be sent out telling someone that they've been gifted a membership in the club. For members, there's a new profile screen that will list all gifts purchased. You can now print a nice looking gift letter, and the coupon code is included in the email for memberships requiring approval. So one of the things we found after we announced gift memberships a couple of months ago is that some clubs required approval for membership. So someone would sign up, and then before they got to the payment page where they could enter the coupon code, the membership would have to be approved. So when the membership is approved, that coupon code is now included in the approval membership. Make it as easy as possible to find.
We will be having a webinar about gift memberships. Will be our next webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. So we hope to see some of you there.
Okay. So for example, if I go to my profile screen, under financial historical data, there's a new option that says gift memberships, and it shows me the gift memberships that I've awarded. And I can also go, for example, to gift memberships. And so if you add gift memberships to the menu, then I can jump in and specify the send date for when that membership needs to be sent. Ad hoc reports. We have this wonderful, incredibly powerful ad hoc reports function. You can create amazing, pivot tables and charts and what are called chain reports, where you combine multiple reports into a single document. The ad hoc reports function does carry an annual additional fee because there's a very powerful business intelligence software program called Exago that we've actually licensed behind the scenes. So we've added a new feature for ad hoc reports that's basically a 30-day free trial. So for all of those clubs that were interested in exploring ad hoc reports and seeing if it would work for you, we now have the 30-day free trial option.
Oh, and for people that are not familiar with the ad hoc reporting, there are a couple of tutorial videos on it, which are good overviews. And we also did, I think, a webinar or two on it. It's very powerful, as Dan said. And in fact, more features have been added recently that even extend some of the types of reports you can do.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Oh, the other thing we've done with ad hoc reports for those clubs and associations that are multi-tier, what we call internally option 2, where basically you have independent child clubs with their own websites and people join at the bottom level, but then there is a parent club, and we've got a number of organizations that are structured that way. We've now added to the ad hoc reports data set at the top level the ability to report on data for all of the linked child clubs. And so that's now in the ad hoc reports function as well. Many of you have been using the credit card refund feature that we added a few months ago that gives you the ability to do refunds to somebody's credit card. And we've now added the ability to refund less than the full amount. And you can specify either a fixed amount, or you can specify a percentage. For example, whatever the registration fee was, if the club has a 20% holdback, you can specify that you're only refunding 80% of the amount. On the money options screen, you can now specify other payment methods. And when you do that, whatever text you specify will appear on the payment page for users, but not admins. So let's have a quick look at that. Money options. So here we have other payment options, and you can specify whatever text you want. And there's different information that you specify here. And when you specify that text, if I go to my payment screen, you'll notice these other payment options appear right down here. And the idea is that if your club has an account with Zelle or Venmo, or for clubs and associations outside the US, there are a lot of local payment methods. For example, we have customers in Australia that have something called a bank pay that all of the major banks in Australia have subscribed to, and people have an app. And as long as they have the BPay number, they can simply use an app on their phone to enter the number and then enter the amount, and the payment just goes straight through to the club. So you can specify those other payment options. When they do that, we don't record the payment immediately as having been paid. But once the club gets a notification that they received a payment from Martin Smith, the club can then go in and can select processed by a separate system and essentially record that payment as having been received. And then the transaction is marked as fully paid. In the Member Manager, we have now improved how we handle searching for names with accented characters. Go to the Member Manager, first name. Renee has disappeared somehow, but the point is that I can search for a name, and if there was an accent over this E right here, then we would still find that matching member.
Dan, it's been pointed out that you had the member type set as a local business.
Hey, thank you to whoever pointed that out. So there's Renee. We searched without the accent and we found the member with the accent. You know, as we start to expand overseas, we're doing a lot more work with customers in Canada, for example. And so, you know, names with accented characters, admins need to be able to find those. You can now configure reminder emails for pending payments to be sent out every 1 to 7 days. If I go back to money options, here it is right here, days between scheduled payment reminders, and you can specify anywhere from 1 to 7 days, and those payment reminders will be sent out automatically. The user transaction export, we've now included some additional information for each member. And this is something that we've done behind the scenes. It's not something that most of you will notice, but we've made a lot of changes to ClubExpress to improve accessibility for users with disabilities. So those users who might be visually impaired and are using a screen reader, we've made some significant improvements in multiple parts of ClubExpress. I won't say right now that we're fully compliant with the accessibility standard, but we're getting there. We're definitely a lot closer than we were. And this is an ongoing project. I mean, we have to make changes in many of the screens. So for example, whenever you see this new user interface, let me just jump over here very quickly. Whenever you see this updated user interface, the search panel looks a bit different. The buttons are now across the top, and you can hide or show the search panel. This represents a module. This was actually the one we used for our pilot. This represents a module that has been updated to make it more accessible. And we'll be moving this model throughout the system over the next few months and years. I mean, it's a long-term project. But the last thing is that in the standard member directory module, we've now added options that allow you to search by city and address. So let's just jump to that one. When I go to the membership directory, I can go to the admin side of this module, and there are new options down at the bottom here to search by city and by address one. And where might you use this? I mean, if you're a national club, you'd certainly potentially want to search by country or state or by city. But if you're a local club, for example, in the Chicago metro area, searching by city allows you to search for Chicago or any of the suburbs around Chicago. But let's say you're a club. We have a number of organizations running on ClubExpress, which are these very large senior and retirement communities around the country with 2,000 or 5,000 homes within the community. And there, you want the ability to be able to search by address because everyone's in the same city and country and state, but you want to be able to search by address. So for example, I can go to Maine and it will find this particular, it happens to be a business member, but it will find this member who's on Main Street. And so that's, particularly useful for these retirement communities. So now we've got time for questions. Sam, I guess you've been monitoring the chat window, and let's see if we have any questions.
Yes, so is there the option to search by province as opposed to city or state?
Well, if you select the ability to search by state, it will be country specific. So if you're in Canada, the text should say the word province instead of the word state, and the drop-down list would have a list of Canadian provinces, certainly rather than US states. In Australia, it would have the word state and it would list the Australian states and territories.
Okay, there were a lot of questions about the business membership. How does that affect the business directory? Does it have any effect on the business directory at all?
It does not affect the business directory. We wrote the business directory specifically for those clubs or associations that want to promote member businesses to the public. So it's a module that's designed to be on the public side of the website. And all of the information in the business directory is separate from the basic contact and company information that's in the club database. So there's no sort of visibility settings because every field is optional. There's no required fields in the business directory. So the idea is that a club can enable the business directory, even if they're using business memberships. They can enable it only for certain member types. And then those members can put whatever information they want. So in the example we've used a couple of times already, if you've got a cycling club that has business memberships for local cycle shops, they can enable the directory, they can enable it for those business members only, and then they can put whatever information they want in the business directory, even potentially multiple stores if they have multiple stores within the metro area, different addresses, different phone number, different opening hours, for example. And all of that information is whatever the member decides to put in there.
So Dan, there's a question, I guess the people are concerned about credit card processing. The changes that you mentioned as far as getting some documentation in, one of the questions was, did this affect my PayPal processing? And so as I understand it, this is only for people that are using the ClubExpress merchant account to handle the processing, and any vetting would be done either by PayPal or by your own credit card processing company if you're using your own account. Is that correct?
That's correct. The comments that I made earlier about credit card processing only applies if you're using the built-in merchant account.
All right. And the other question is there a deadline before we get the docs to you?
Well, first of all, there's no documentation that needs to be provided. It'll all be online. We'll be asking you to enter information into a couple of fields. You don't need to send us anything. And secondly, there is a deadline, but it's really sort of spread out. So once we deploy this new feature, we'll send out an email only to those clubs or associations where some of this information is missing. There'll be a link in the email. You'll go to a special form that's not accessible anywhere else on the website, fill in the information and click save, and then you're done. And then we'll wait for a couple of weeks. And then we'll send out that email again, but instead of sending it to 2,000 clubs, now we're only sending it to 800 clubs. And then hopefully a couple of weeks later, now it's only being sent to 300 clubs. And the point is that we need to collect this information, but we're going to try to be as flexible as possible. Ultimately, I'm not sure what the exact deadline will be. Maybe it's the end of the year, but by the end of the year, we'll be cracking down and saying, look, if you haven't provided this information, we have to turn credit card processing off. It's one of those things that is, outside our control. We're simply the payment facilitator, and our merchant processor is responsible to the underwriting bank, and the underwriting bank in turn is responsible to Visa and MasterCard, and they in turn are responsible to the Federal Reserve Bank and the US Department of Treasury and the IRS. So we have to follow the rules. Any other questions?
I think you covered pretty much everything that was there, unless Samantha's got something else.
Nope, those covered all the questions.
Okay, that's great. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating. I hope we've shown you some things that, maybe not everything, but certainly some things in this release will be of value to every club. And I do want to encourage you to look out for version 9.5, which is coming. There's going to be some very exciting changes in that one, improvements and new features to some major parts of the system. So we're on a tear right now, and very excited to bring all of these enhancements to you. So thanks again, stay safe and healthy, and we'll be in touch real soon.
Thank you everyone for coming.